ahead?
Well, merely that inflation is still very high. It's pretty close to 4%. Could creep slightly higher from here. Certainly, it's going to stay above 3.5% for the end of the year, into the end of the year. And that's uncomfortable territory for the Bank of England, particularly worried about food inflation, which has been pretty picking up recently. And of course, after 2 or 3 years of very elevated inflation, they are worried about that staying higher for longer. So that's
Rachel Reeves' War on Pensioners, the Golden Goose Slaughter. If you're not already subscribed to UK Connors, hit that subscribe button now, because what I'm about to reveal will make your blood boil, and you won't want to miss a single moment of our political analysis that cuts through the Westminster spin. Picture this. Your grandmother, having worked 40 years, paid her taxes religiously, never claimed a penny she wasn't entitled to, now sits in her modest flat counting every pound as energy bills soar and food prices spiral. Enter Rachel Reeves, our illustrious Chancellor, eyeing that pension like a hawk circling wounded prey. This isn't just politics. This is predatory governance at its most cynical. Rachel Reeves has apparently decided that tackling the bloated public sector or cutting the endless stream of benefits flowing to those who've never contributed a single day's work is simply too difficult. Far easier, it seems, to raid the pockets of those who've already given their working lives to this country. The pensioners of Britain have become nothing more than a golden goose to be plucked clean, and Reeves is sharpening her knife. Let me paint you the grotesque reality of what we're witnessing. The Resolution Foundation, that left-wing think tank with more Labour connections than a party conference networking event, has handed Reeves a blueprint for betrayal. Their proposal? Cut national insurance by 2p, then crank up income tax to compensate. Sounds reasonable until you realize who gets caught in this web of fiscal manipulation. 8.7 million pensioners who don't pay employee national insurance suddenly find themselves with bigger tax bills. 4.3 million landlords and self-employed workers, already stretched thin, face the same fate. This sleight of hand would generate £6 billion, ripped directly from the pockets of those who believed their government would honor the social contract they spent decades paying into. Here's what makes this particularly nauseating. These older generations have already contributed decades of national insurance specifically to fund their state pensions and health care. They've held up their end of the bargain, working through recessions, paying their dues, building the prosperity that today's politicians take for granted. Now, in their autumn years, they're being told the deal has changed. I witnessed this firsthand. My own mother was paying £7,000 per month for her care home before she passed earlier this year. £7,000 every single month, coming straight out of her life savings. Despite shouldering this enormous cost privately, relieving the government of any burden, she was still hammered with taxes on her modest pension income. Where was the gratitude? Where was the recognition that she was paying her own way, asking nothing from the state? Nowhere to be found. This is the truth they don't want you to see. Politicians like Reeves view older people as easy targets. They know pensioners have already concluded this government is hopeless and will never vote for them again, so why not squeeze them dry? It's political calculation at its most heartless. But here's what really exposes the hypocrisy of this entire charade. While Reeves scrambles to extract every penny from pensioners, she conveniently ignores the real sources of fiscal hemorrhaging. The public sector's gold-plated final salary pensions represent a future liability of £1.6 trillion. £1.6 trillion. Let that number sink in while you watch civil servants enjoying 4-day weeks and retirement packages most private sector workers can only dream of. Then there's the benefits bonanza flowing to foreign nationals and non-working households in the UK, costing over £1 billion annually. Two runaway sources of national debt that will only accelerate unless someone has the backbone to take control. But does Reeves target these obvious areas of waste? Of course not. That would require actual political courage. Instead, we get this pathetic spectacle of a chancellor who promised growth but delivered stagnation, now desperately hunting for cash to fund her bloated administration. Keir Starmer's weakness has left him vulnerable to hard-left MPs demanding ever more spending, while the country bleeds money through every poorly managed department. The most effective way to reduce costs isn't to raise taxes, it's to stop the reckless spending. But rather than putting country before party as Labour promised during their campaign, they are terrorized by the prospect of the next election and are simply targeting anyone they can label as wealthy. Never mind that many pensioners are anything but wealthy, surviving on fixed incomes while everything around them becomes more expensive. Their first budget was an unmitigated disaster, triggering economic turmoil that reminded everyone why Labour can't be trusted with the nation's finances. Now they are doubling down, determined to extract more from demographics that have already contributed far more than their fair share. Margaret Thatcher once observed that the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. We're witnessing that principle in real time. Rather than confront the fundamental inefficiencies of the state, Labour would rather raid pension pots and call it economic policy. Consider the obscene injustice of what's happening while pensioners face this assault. Public sector workers enjoy 4-day weeks while the private sector graft to pay their wages. Illegal immigrants receive benefits and 4-star hotel accommodation, while British pensioners choose between heating and eating. The very people who built this country are being treated as expendable cash cows, while newcomers who've contributed nothing receive red carpet treatment. Pensioners are already experiencing devastating pressure from persistent inflation and a cost of living crisis that shows no signs of abating. They are living on fixed incomes while everything from energy to groceries becomes increasingly unaffordable. Thanks to Boris Johnson's failure to cap private nursing home fees, they face extortionate charges in their final years. To then burden them with additional taxes is not just economically destructive, it's morally repugnant. The government should be addressing the root causes of fiscal instability. Stop migrants from exploiting our benefit system. Slash the pampered public sector back to sustainable levels. Put Britain's house in order before demanding more from those who've already given everything. But if there's one lesson Starmer's administration has taught us, it's that they are fundamentally weak and cowardly, preferring to parasitize vulnerable communities rather than tackle the underlying problems. Every penny of state and private pension belonging to older generations who worked for decades and paid their taxes is rightfully theirs. These funds should never become a pot for desperate chancellors to raid after making promises they couldn't keep. The very notion of increasing taxes on pensioners represents a new low for this collection of underperforming politicians. Here's what this really reveals about Labour's priorities. They'll move heaven and earth to protect public sector privileges and migrant benefits, but they'll gladly sacrifice pensioners on the altar of fiscal expedience. They talk endlessly about fairness while engineering the most unfair policy imaginable, targeting those least able to fight back. This isn't just bad economics, it's a fundamental betrayal of the social contract that holds our society together. When you spend your working life contributing to the system with the promise that you will be looked after in retirement, only to discover politicians view your pension as their personal piggy bank, the entire foundation of trust crumbles. What makes this even more infuriating is the sheer incompetence underlying it all. If Reeves had delivered the growth she promised, if Labour had shown even basic competence in managing the economy, these desperate measures wouldn't be necessary. Instead, we're watching a chancellor flail about, looking for quick fixes to problems created by her own inadequacy. The British people aren't stupid. They can see through this transparent attempt to disguise economic failure as progressive taxation. They understand that targeting pensioners is a path of least resistance for a government too weak to make the hard choices that would actually fix our fiscal problems. This is why voters are increasingly supporting parties committed to reducing the size of the state and ending the culture of waste that pervades every level of government. People have had enough of watching their hard-earned money disappear into bureaucratic black holes while they are told there's no money for the services they actually need. The pensioners being targeted by Reeves aren't wealthy elites hiding money in offshore accounts. They are ordinary people who worked ordinary jobs, saved what they could, and trusted that their government would honor its commitments. Now they are discovering that trust was misplaced. Every policy choice reveals character, and what Rachel Reeves targeting a pensioners reveals is a character of someone who would rather pick the pockets of the vulnerable than confront the powerful interests bleeding the country dry. It's the mindset of a politician who sees citizens as resources to be harvested rather than people to be served. This is the new normal under Labour. Weakness disguised as tough choices, targeting the defenseless while protecting the wasteful. It's a government that promised change but delivered more of the same tired, failed policies that have brought us to this point. And now, when those policies predictably fail, rather than admit error and change course, they double down and demand even more from those who've already given everything. The war on pensioners isn't just an economic policy, it's a moral choice. And the choice Rachel Reeves has made tells us everything we need to know about the values driving this government. That's the reality of where we are today. A chancellor so desperate and incompetent that she's willing to betray the very people who built the prosperity she's now squandering. If this doesn't make you angry enough to demand better from your politicians, nothing will. Make sure you're subscribed because we'll be tracking every move this government makes as they continue their assault on working families and pensioners alike. The story is far from over, and neither is our coverage.